Hello guys. So, this is your IT Elective 3 and Game Analysis Design module number 4. Our topic for this module is attributes, creating and quantifying life. So, for this module, ang gagawin natin or the coverage of the discussion for this module will be discussing ano ba yung attributes, okay? So, what is a game attribute? What is a game mechanics? Okay? Then what are the usual game attributes that we're currently seeing dun sa mga games na nilalaro natin that are available on the market. Okay, so after the discussions regarding attributes and mechanics, listing different types of attributes, no, I'll be providing you an assignment wherein you need to conceptualize a game character. Okay, yung conceptualization of that game character is you need to create your original concept art. Okay, then you'll also be listing down what are the attributes ng character na kinoconceptualize nyo na yun. Okay? Aside from the attributes, no, you'll also be providing a description. What's the purpose of those attributes? Ano bang klaseng attributes yun? Bakit merong ganong attributes yung inyong character? So, basically, that will be the sum of our discussion for today, no? So, here are your objectives. So, the first one will be to learn how to differentiate what is a game mechanic versus a game attribute. So the second one will be learn how to conceptualize and list attributes for a game object. And lastly, this is the one that I'm telling you, no, yung assignment nyo. So you need to design a draft of a game character with its corresponding concept art and attributes. Later on, I'll be further discussing pa what will be the specifics of your assignment, no. So let's start. So first, no, again, our topic for module number 4 will be attributes, creating and quantifying life. So, first is, let's start with what's an attribute. So, one of the most common early tasks system designers perform is to create attributes for game objects. So, first, no, ano ba ang game object? So, when we say game object, these are basically the things or, characters that you're playing within the game. So, let's say for example, no, you're playing a game, you have this character, ang tawag po natin doon is a game object. It doesn't necessarily mean na kapag sinabi natin game object is it's a physical object or parang a thing dun sa loob ng game na hindi living thing, no? Kapag sinabi natin game object, this could be your characters within the game. Okay? So, pwedeng tao, pwedeng hayop, or this could be parang simple objects like sabihin na natin armors or weapons that your character can wield or pwedeng gamitin ng inyong character. So, that will be your game objects. Now, ano ba ngayon yung attributes? So, basically, attributes will be parang, we can simply say na these are characteristics ng inyong game objects. Okay? So, ano ba yung characteristics niya? Halimbawa, simple ano na lang, let's say armors. Yung stats niya for the defense, that's an attribute. Okay? So, let's say, for example, you have your character. We have yung mga classification ng character natin. Let's say, mages, knights, those are attributes. Okay? So, we can define game objects as any individual object in a game that does something. Okay? So, sabi ko nga kanina, no, it could be your characters or it could be the weapons or armors na pwedeng gamitin ng inyong mga characters. So, the catchline in here is an object in the game that does anything or does something, no? So, if there will be interaction na nangyayari between these objects, maybe an object or a character to sabihin na natin an NPC or non-player character. So, yung NPC na yun is also an object or game object. Let's say, for example, yung nga sinabi ko kanina, armors and weapons. So, merong interactions between the character and yung mga items na to, no? So, we can consider them as game object. Kung halimbawa, if it's a background na wala namang ibang ginagawa, kundi just to display, no? So, alam niyo yun, we can consider it as a game object. It could also be as simple as a block of ground that has texture and collision, all the way up to the character that has vast array of attributes, animations, 3D meshes, and more. So as I mentioned earlier, no, lahat po ng mga objects that you can see within the game na possible magkaroon ng interaction. Okay? Let's say yung ground, no, what is the interaction within the ground, no? So let's say for example, your character, no, once he or she is stepping on the ground, hindi siya nalalaglag. Meron siyang collision. That's an interaction. We can consider the ground as an object. Pero katulad ng pinrovide ko na example kanina, let's say if it's just a background, no? Parang ang purpose lang niya is, alam niyo yun, to display an image, pwede nyong lakaran, pwede nyong lampasan, then siguro we can't consider it as a game object. So now let's continue, no? So for our next topic is regarding mechanics versus attributes. So the first one is game objects can be defined using attributes and mechanics. Okay, so we have two ways now on how can we define our game objects. That will be your attributes and your mechanics. So in here, let's have a brief description of what mechanics and what attributes are. So first is, to simply put, mechanics are rules. Okay? Mechanics are rules that govern usage. Okay? So you can simply, ano na lang, just, tawag dito, pwede nyo tandaan na when we say mechanics, these are rules. Okay? Now, how about attributes? So attributes are values that influence those rules. Okay? So, attributes yung mga yan. Yung attributes are values. So, kapag sinabi nating values, it doesn't necessarily mean na parang numeric values lang yan, no? So, we can simply say na, halimbawa, yung kanina, in example natin, no? An armor, yung defense attribute niya or yung defense niya, yung numerical value for the defense is an attribute. Okay? Halimbawa, yung character naman na binabanggit ko kanina, yung character classifications or character classes, no? Halimbawa, mage, knights, ano pa ba, yung mga clerics, barbarians, okay, priest, etc., etc. Those are also example of attributes nung particular game object na yon. Okay? So, those are some of the examples of the attributes na meron tayo for different types of characters. Later on, no, we'll be providing a list or different types of list ng mga possible na pwede natin gawin na attributes for your game characters or dun sa game na gagawin nyo depending on how you're going to design the game. So in a practical sense, for video games, mechanics require some amount of encoding, whereas attributes are represented as values. So pagdating dun nga sa mga games, no, kapag mechanic yan, it's basically constructed using codes. Okay? So halimbawa dun sa game nyo, no, you'll be implementing a mechanic na ganito, ganyan, there will be a counterpart of code. Okay? So, yung mga code na yon, once executed, sila yung mag-i-implement ng mechanics for the game. Pagdating naman dun sa attributes, these are just represented as data. So, mostly, makikita po natin itong attributes na to dun sa database ng inyong game. So, let's say, yung database nyo holds the information for the different types of items, yung attributes ng mga items na yun. Halimbawa, yung attack niya, yung defense niya, yung dexterity niya, etc., etc. Lahat ng mga yan will be seen in the database. And mostly, we can assume na possibly, karamihan ng laman ng database natin for a game will be attributes. So, in a board game, mechanics require rules or combination of rules and attributes are represented as values. So, halimbawa, no, let's proceed sa next natin, no. So, think of the game chess. You could say that each square on the board is an object. So, halimbawa, itong each square dito, no, is an object. Pwede natin siya lagyan ng attribute. Okay, halimbawa, ano bang pwedeng attribute ang ilagay natin for this, ano? For this, tawag dito, square. Halimbawa, color. We can simply assign an attribute of color for this game object. Halimbawa, ito square na to, it's colored whether cream or white. Sabihin na natin cream or white, or pwedeng kulayan natin siya ng green. That's already an attribute. Okay? There are also rules about what pieces can be placed on each square to begin the game. So, in addition, each piece is also an object. So, as you can see, no, when you're playing chess, so initially, yung mga pieces natin are placed sa ganitong positioning. Okay? So, doon pumapasok ngayon yung tinatawag natin na rules or mechanics. Okay? So, halimbawa, pwede ba nating ilagay, or, no, yun, following the rules, no, of chess, possible ba? Or pwede ba na ilagay natin yung mga pawns natin doon sa first layer na to? No. Okay? Or sabihin na natin, dito sa second layer na to, pwede ba natin ilagay yung pawns natin? No. Dapat yung pawns natin nandun sa harapan. Kasi, basically, chess is an abstraction of war, wherein you have your major pieces like your queen, your king, your knights, no? Yung nandun sa pinakaharapan will be your pawns, your regular warriors. Lagi silang nandun sa harapan. Again, no, if we'll be following yung mga really simple concept of chess, hindi natin pwedeng ilagay sa likod yung mga pawns natin at the start of the game. So, that will be an example of a mechanic of a rule that is being applied or that is being used in chess. So, all of these objects have their own mechanics and attributes. Okay? So, halimbawa, sabihin na lang natin yung mga chess pieces natin, no? Ano ba yung mga simple, ano ng mga yan? Simple attributes and mechanics, no? So, sabihin na lang natin, no? Possible na ilagay natin yung attributes is the name of the piece. Okay? Pagdating do sa mechanics niya, how many steps yung kaya niyang gawin at a time? Halimbawa, yung pawn natin, no? Mechanic niya is pwede lang siyang gumalaw ng one step or one square at a time. So, that could be, that is an example of your mechanics. Okay? So, that will be yung ating example of chess for the mechanics and attributes. So, aside from the pawn, okay, we also have yung tinatawag natin na king and queen. So, a king and queen in a chess both have the mechanics that they can move in any 8 directions on a turn. So, however, the king can only move one space if the path is clear, whereas the queen may move up to 8 spaces if the path is clear. So, we could simply say that the king has a movement attribute of 1, which the mechanic being the space must be clear. Okay? Attribute is 1, mechanic is space should be clear, and the queen has a movement attribute of 8 with the same movement mechanic. So, ibig sabihin, no, for the king, ang movement attribute niya is 1. Ibig sabihin, it can only move one space at a time. Pagdating naman dun sa queen natin, it can move movement attribute of 8. So same movement mechanic sila, the space must be clear. Okay? Let's consider other games naman, no? So, let's consider Galaga. So, itong Galaga na to is basically tawag dito, an old school arcade game, no? So, itong GIF na to, it will be displaying how the gameplay of Galaga works. So, in Galaga, a player's spaceship has several mechanics. It can move side to side, it can fire projectiles at enemy ships, and it takes damage when it collided with an enemy ship or projectile. So, ayan, ito yung ating spaceship, no? So, for Galaga, the mechanics for the movement nung ating character na to will be from left to right. Okay, pwede nating i-move ngayon yung inyong character ng left to right, tapos, it can also shoot out projectiles, yung mga bala. Okay, so, that will be its, sample nung ating mga mechanics. So, halimbawa, yung ship naman natin, no? Siya naman yung tinamaan ng mga projectiles from the enemies, it takes damage. So, meron tayong HP or meron tayong mga lives na available dito sa game na to. So, those are some of the examples of the mechanics that we have para dito sa mga games na to, no? So, basically, no, kapag sinabi natin mechanics, every game that you're playing, whether old school, very old school game, sabihin na natin mga brick game, mga Game Boys nyo, or kung inabutan nyo man yung mga yon, your PlayStations, Xboxes, or kahit yung mga simpleng games that we play on your mobile phones or on your PCs, basically, these are constructed, or alam nyo yun, these are games na implements mechanics and attributes. Kasi pwede natin sabihin na walang game na walang attributes or walang mechanics. Kasi how can you create a game wherein walang rules? 'Di ba? So, itong mga games na to will provide us rules. Then, alam nyo, that creates the concept of the game. Okay? Next is, player spaceship has several mechanics, no? So, ito nga, sinabi natin, it can move side to side. Okay? So, without changing the mechanics, you can dramatically affect the gameplay by manipulating the attributes. Okay, so halimbawa, no, sabihin na natin, ito yung mechanics natin, constant yung mga yan. It can move side to side. Okay, so halimbawa kanina, this is the speed wherein gumagalaw yung ano natin, no, yung ating player spaceship. Okay, kung halimbawa, we won't be changing anything dito. Halimbawa, we won't be changing any of the mechanics. So, if we'll be changing yung ating tinatawag na attributes, is it possible ba to alam yun, to create a big impact nun sa game? Yes. Let's say for example, sabihin na natin, no, you lower the movement nitong player spaceship na to. Every click mo, magmo-move lang siya ng 1 pixel. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, babagal yung movement niya. Hihirap ba nun yung game? Possibly yes. Why? Kasi yung speed ng bala, ng projectile ng kalaban mo remains the same, mabilis, but your movement will be very slow. So, ibig sabihin, it will be very hard for you to dodge yung enemy bullets. So, in creating your games or in designing your games, there should be a balance between the game mechanics and the game attributes that you're using to implement dun sa game nyo. Any imbalance that will happen dun sa ating game attributes or game mechanics will possibly result dun sa, alam nyo yun, pagiging imbalance ng game nyo where it could possibly, alam nyo yun, affect na mas dumali, mawalan ng thrill yung game nyo. So, kung walang masyadong thrill, walang masyadong sabihin na natin difficulty, mawawala yung replayability ng game. So, if ever, for example naman, sobrang hirap ng mechanics mo, most probably, mga players that want to play a very simple game won't be playing your game. So again, as I've mentioned, when you're designing your game, a balance between the game mechanics and the game attributes is essential. Okay, next. For the next part of our discussion, we'll be proceeding to listing down attributes. So in here, we'll try to list down what are the different attributes that a character can have. But just a disclaimer, all the listed attributes dito on our following discussion, not necessarily yun yung makikita natin on every character. So the attributes that I'll be showing you in here will be just examples. If you'll be the one na nagde-design na nung inyong game character, it's up to you what you're going to list down as the game attributes. Kasi it will depend dun din sa type of game na lalaroin nyo. Whether those attributes will be useful dun sa game na i-create nyo, So, again, yung mga attributes natin will be numeric data. Most probably, they affect the game. So, first, for a very simple game, a game object may have only one or even no attributes. Okay, so, but you can simply assume, kahit yung mga basic games natin, they'll have at least one attribute. So, for checkers, for example, has no functional attributes since all the pieces behave exactly with the same manner. But we can also put an example of what will be the game attributes. Kung halimbawa, if you'll be playing chess, physical chess, possibly walang attribute yan. Yes. Kasi, hindi naman necessary yon pagdating dun sa play ng physical game na chess, But if you'll be creating a chess game, a video game, it's very essential to have an attribute kasi you need to use the attributes to differentiate what will be the purpose and function ng iba't ibang pieces natin. Okay? And also, what will be the purpose and function ng mga spaces, yung mga squares natin. Okay? So, for more complicated games, game objects may have dozens of attributes, some seen by the player, some hidden, and some derived with calculations. Okay? So, those games, halimbawa, sabihin na natin, like MOBA games, maraming attributes yung mga yan. Okay, so let's say for example, minsan your characters will have different types of attributes. Sabihin na natin yung mga basic strength, agility, intelligence, etc., etc. Yung mga items na ini-equip mo sa kanila will have attributes. Okay? So we have different types of attributes depending dun sa game. More complex games, mas maraming attributes tayo makikita. So, the first step in creating attributes for an object is to take a very close look at the object that you want to define. So, halimbawa, before starting to list down the attributes, dapat meron ka ng idea what will be the concept of the character or the object na ililist down mo yung kanyang attributes. Kasi, mahirap mag-conceptualize or hindi ka pwede mag-conceptualize ng mga attributes when you don't have an idea or at least sabihin na natin na a vision of what your character or what will be that game object will look like and how it will function dun sa game mo. So, let's say, let's start dito, So, halimbawa, we'll be starting with this, very generic person. Ayan. So, sabihin na natin the attributes that we will be listing down will be for this person. Itong napaka-generic na person na to. So, usually, makikita natin itong character na to dun sa mga stickman games natin, So, let's say, if we'll be taking close look dito sa mga to, pwede na nating isipin ngayon what will be the attributes and what are the mechanics na pwede nating ilagay dito sa sa character na to. So you need to think about all the facets of the object that might be different from instance to instance. So basically, no, kailangan mong isipin ngayon what will be the different attributes that you can assign to this very generic person. So let's say for example, sabihin na natin I want to add a strength attribute para dito sa very generic person na to. Yung skill natin will be from 0 to 100 regarding strength. Ang gusto kong ilagay ngayon is strength is 100. So, maximum strength siya ngayon. But if you'll be looking again dito sa concept art natin, no, you'd like, siguro, maybe you'd like to change how the character will look kasi the attribute that you'll be adding is strength 100. So, that will be the maximum strength. But basically, yung attribute na yun doesn't reflect dito sa concept art natin na to or dito sa character, sa image ng character na to. Okay? So, what I suggest is when you're listing down, no, your attributes, no, isipin nyo muna, how do you see your character? Do you want your character to be something, to be something strong? Okay? So, i-align lang natin kung ano yung makikita natin for your concept art. So, the first step in coming up with a list of attribute is just to write down what comes to mind quickly. So, ang first step natin will be, ayan nga, no? Halimbawa, sabi nga natin, no, the character that we want to provide attributes will be a person, a very generic person. So, pwede natin ilagay dyan, height, width, waistline, or kung halimbawa, you want to add wings dun sa character mo, ayan, maglagay ka ng wingspan, shoe size, hat size. So, eto, yung mga generic natin na mga game attributes, no? So, strength, dexterity, etc., etc. Just think about anything that you want to add dun sa attributes na yan, no? So, ang mangyayari lang kasi dyan is, you just list it down. Okay? Provide as many as you want, provide as many as you can, kasi along the way naman, babawasan at babawasan nyo pa rin naman yung mga attributes na yun. Kasi you need to plan out how you're going to use these attributes dun sa game. Okay? So, halimbawa, no, be creating an MMORPG. Pagdating dun sa game natin, yung hat size ba will matter? It will be depending on you how you're going to design the game. Kasi halimbawa, you have items na hats. Okay? So, wherein meron silang minimum size requirement, sabihin na natin. And each size requirement will provide you different attributes that could be used on your advantage. So, bahala kayo. So, the catch in here is to list down as many attributes as you can for the game object na gusto mo lagyan ng attribute. Next is we have blue sky brainstorming, no? So, after you've listed the very obvious attributes, the ones that spring quickly to your mind, you enter the blue sky phase of attribute brainstorming. So, during this phase, you should be open to any and all contributions. Even silly ones in this phase, you might add the following attributes to your list. So, in here, no, you brainstorm pa. You create, you perform a second brainstorming wherein hindi na yung mga something na obvious yung ilalagay natin as your attributes. You think of something of an attribute na sabihin na natin is not commonly seen on these characters, okay? Tapos you list them down. So, ito will be some of the examples na meron tayo. Again, no, tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, you just list down what will be the attributes na gusto mong ilagay kasi along the way, mababawasan at mababawasan pa rin naman ito. So, halimbawa, magic aptitude, magnetic personality, humor, stench, clumsiness, luck. These are some of the examples ng mga attributes na pwede natin ilagay. Halimbawa, ito, stench. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng stench? Okay? So, it refers regarding to smell. Okay? So, halimbawa, sabihin na natin na mabaho. Okay? Or, not actually mabaho kasi pwede natin sabihin na unpleasant smell. Ganyan na lang yung stench natin, no? Definition natin ng stench. So, in terms of games na mga nilalaro natin, no? Parang napaka-konti pa lang yung nag-i-implement nung sabihin na natin stench as a game attribute. One that I know is yung Axie. So, I believe yung ano bang tawag dun sa card na yon? there is a card dun sa Axie wherein ano, or actually it's a debuff, no? So sa Axie wherein once you applied stench dun sa isang Axie ng kalaban mo, hindi mo aatakihin yon. You'll be proceeding dun sa next na enemy. Okay? So aside from doon, wala na akong ibang maisip wherein merong ano, alam niyo yun, merong application yung stench. But let's say, how about luck? Okay, so let's say for example, itong lock na to, if will be referring dun sa attribute, no, some game items, especially sa mga nalaro ko, like I believe it's MU or yung Mew, tawag ng iba, there is what we call lock. Itong lock na to are attached to items. Okay, it's an attribute to items. Kapag merong lock, yung sabihin na natin yung item mo, it will have a higher success rate in upgrading. Okay? So, these are some of the examples of of attributes that you can add or you can conceptualize for your games, no, and can be implemented dun sa game nyo. In this phase of creating attributes, you want to come up with as many as possible. So, quantity is more important than quality. So, going through the process of defining objects, people tend to get more close-minded and focused. It is therefore especially important to take advantage of this very early blue sky phase to be as creative and open to new ideas as possible. So, as I've mentioned previously, no, in the initial brainstorming no mga game attributes nyo for your game objects, mas marami, mas maganda. Okay, kasi okay, no, you can list down everything, mas marami yung maipe-prepare mo, mas marami kayo mapagpipilian, then possibly, no, mas makukuha nyo what will be the totality of the attributes that you want to add dun sa inyong game character. Kasi madali naman magtanggal dyan sa sobrang dami na yan eh. You just need to conceptualize, alam mo, this attribute will have a factor dun sa game. If wala, alisin. If oo, i-retain. Pwede tayong mag-go that process, no? Mas madali natin magagawa yung process na yun, no, kung marami tayong attributes. Kasi mas maraming attribute, mas maganda kasi mas madaling magtanggal kaysa sa magdagdag. Okay? Next, researching attributes. So, for researching attributes, no, dito papasok ngayon, what will be the different references na meron tayo in terms of listing down the attributes. Itong mga references na to could be from experience, no, or sabihin na natin from the games that you played previously, or pwedeng attach sila from reality. Okay? So, once you have a large list of both basic attributes and more creative attributes, you can move on to the next phase of creation, which is research. So, it is highly recommended to do this phase after the creative phase because research will form a construct in your mind about what these objects should be based on what others have observed. So, for a generic person object, you would want to research two things: attributes that define people in the real world and the attributes that others have used to define people in previous games. So, as I mentioned kanina, no, we have two ways on referencing what were the previous attributes. Paano natin naisip itong mga previous attributes na ginawa natin dun sa umpisa. So, most probably, you'll have two references for that. So, either nga, no, yung mga references na yon or yung mga attributes na yon will be nakita mo from previous games na nilaro mo. Okay? Or sa mga games na currently nilalaro mo, or sa mga games na nakita mo lang. Or itong mga attributes na to can be grounded from reality. So, sabihin na natin, no, if meron kang generic person, siguro in real life attributes pagdating sa halimbawa, simple na lang sa pageant, no, vital statistics. So, yung waistline, nandun, kasama yan, that's an attribute. That's grounded on reality. So, researching real-world attributes, no? When researching a person's object, you might want to look at sites that provide statistics for individual people, such as exercise or diet sites, medical and reference sites, education sites, and demographic studies. So, when you research attributes from real life, you might come up with the following. So, again, no, as I mentioned previously, here is a list of attributes, no? But it doesn't necessarily mean na kung ano yung nakalist na attributes dito. Ito na yung mga attributes na ilalagay natin dun sa game object or dun sa game character na ginagawa nyo. So, here are some of the examples of real-world attributes. Let's say blood oxygen level, bench press weight, bicep curls weight, squat weight, hearing ability, 100-meter dash time, marathon time, eyeglasses prescription. So, itong mga to, again, no, will be examples of real-world attributes. So, this list could get absolutely enormous. As a system designer, you can choose to level to which you want to simplify and how much you want to include dun sa mga attributes na yon. Halimbawa, sabihin na lang natin, no, ano ba? So, let's say for example, no, you're creating a MOBA game. So, sabihin na natin, kikreate ka ng MOBA game. So, how would I prescription affect yung character mo, ay character pagdating dun sa ano, sa MOBA game na nilalaro mo? Most probably, parang hindi. For me, if tatanungin mo ako, hindi. Okay? So, halimbawa, blood oxygen level, or sabihin na natin, blood pressure. Okay. How can that affect yung game? Halimbawa, you're familiar with Rapture, di ba? Habang tinatakbo mo, lalong tumataas yung damage. So, ano ba ang basis nun? It's basically habang tumatakbo at tumataas yung blood pressure mo, kung merong butas dun sa mga veins mo, most probably lalabas at lalabas yung dugo dun. Mas mabilis lalabas yung dugo dun, mas bibilis yung pagkamatay mo. So, we can simply say na yung skill na Rapture is grounded on reality or meron siyang basis from reality. Okay? So, a good rule of the thumb is to include at least twice as much on the list as you think you might need. So, again, no, mas marami, mas maganda. Why? Kasi you can just simply remove them along the way. So, next, you can research past games to see what attributes they use to define a person. So, when you find any that you have not included yet on your list, write them down. Okay? So, pagdating dito, sabi nga natin, no, in researching for past games, these are usually the references na nagagamit natin when we're already designing the game. So, halimbawa, for this research, you should start with games on similar genres that include objects that are same as or similar to objects that you are creating. So, halimbawa, no, you're creating, sabihin na natin, a particular character na ganito, a human character. Pwede mong gamitin yung mga references from other games wherein meron din silang implementation ng human character. Siguro, no, have an inspiration galing dun sa mga games na yun, then you modify it before you implement it dun sa mga games na dinidesign mo. This step intentionally occurs late in the brainstorming process because it is the step that is most likely to narrow your creative focus. Why? Kasi ganito lang yan eh. If it worked, yung paglalagay ng attributes na yun from previous games, most probably, it will also work dun sa game mo. Okay? Kasi, alam mo yun, parang it's an initial test wherein okay lang ba maglagay ng strength for the character? Most probably, yes. Kasi kung titingnan mo halos lahat ng mga characters from different types of games, they'll have a strength attribute. Okay? So, when you research attributes from the games, you might want to list the following attributes for your generic person. Halimbawa, Constitution, Wisdom, Acrobatics, Movement, Speed, Intimidation, Spirit, Melee, Range, Accuracy. Okay, so, halimbawa, no, you're creating a generic person para sa isang shooter game. Okay, so, ano ba yung mga importante dyan? Okay? Movement speed. Okay? You can define yung movement speed niya. Gaano siya kabilis gumalaw. Halimbawa, yung range accuracy niya. How accurate yung kanyang mga, sabihin na natin, sniper shots. Etc. etc. So, referring to your own personal attribute bank. So, in here, no, there is what we call a personal attribute bank wherein it's basically parang a list of the of attributes that you previously have done, okay? Or basically these are attributes na you already know, you're already familiar with when we're referring to a particular character, whether it's a person character, a beast character, etc. etc. So when you are new at listing attributes, you won't have such a bank yet, but it will grow quickly. So this is a list of attributes that designers has used multiple times for different objects across many games. So again, no, this is basically a repository of the attributes that you previously used sa ibang games, or parang what will be the attributes na alam mo, okay, within your mind. It doesn't necessarily mean na you have a physical database or database kung saan nakalist down yung inyong mga attributes, or pwedeng nasa isip mo lang naman yung mga attributes na yan. So, since there are no specific criteria for what attributes go into your personal bank, it is likely that most of them will not be applicable to any given new object that you're trying to define. So, let's say, for example, you already have your personal attribute bank, no? Meron ka, sabihin na natin, an Excel file or a document file wherein nakalist doon yung ibang mga attributes na naisip mo. If you'll be creating a something unique na character, most probably, hindi magiging applicable yung mga yon. Okay, why? Kasi you already used them previously to something not unique, no? So, if you're creating a unique character, same as with the attributes. An attribute bank is similar to idea buffet that could even be included in the same document. So, halimbawa, you're providing your game design document, no? Ayan. You can have your attribute bank. So, defining an attribute. So, each attribute is a single word or a very short phrase. So, halimbawa, ito, the items that are listed in here, you have your health, speed, ayan, mga attributes yan. Okay, itong mga body parts na to, ayan, this could also be example of attributes. So, this is what you want when coming up with new ideas as trying to define every attribute during the brainstorming phase. So, ang mangyayari, no, what you want to do in the pagde-design ng mga attributes, no, you want to limit it to a single word or very short phrase. Pero most of the time naman, if you'll be seeing yung ating mga attributes, no, they're limited to to one word only. Kasi parang alam yun, it's easier to understand, it's easier to remember if the attribute is limited to a single word only. So, to make attributes useful, however, you must go further and define them. Okay, so, dyan papasok ngayon yung how you're going to describe, how you're going to define what that attribute is. Okay, kapag sinabi nating health, how does health, sabihin na natin, is being used pagdating dun sa character mo, dun sa game mo? Okay, ano ba yan? Is it hit points, HIT points? Ibig sabihin, ilang beses ka pwedeng tamaan before ka mamatay? Or sabihin na natin, health bar ba yan? Wherein meron kang value na 0 to 100, wherein yung damage na nare-receive mo, nababawas doon. Okay? Something like that. Halimbawa, how does speed matters pagdating dun sa game? Etc. etc. No? So, kung speed ba yan, sino bang uunang titira? Or gaano ba kabilis mangyayari yung skill? That's possible. So, when you're listing down the attributes, you also need to provide a description or the definition how the attribute will work in the game. So, how do you define an attribute? So, for example, what is strength? This seems like a pretty straightforward question. Okay? So, by looking at different people, you can often guess whether one person is stronger than the other. So, let's say, for example, no, halimbawa, this is a sample of, sabihin na natin, a concept art or an example of the character that you want to design. Halimbawa, you already have this concept art, tapos mag-aalagay ka ng attribute ngayon. If you'll be looking in this particular character, what will be the attribute ba na you want to attach with this character? So, first thing will be, makikita mo, yung character mo is malaking tao, muscular man. So, siguro, you can attach automatically yung strength. Add ka ng strength dyan. Ano pa ba? So, melee attack, ayan. You can also attach that. So, I would suggest, no, you create muna siguro a very rough, ano ba dito? Rough representation of what your character will look like. Provide mo yung mga attributes na gusto mo makita dun sa kanya. Finalize mo yung concept art. Okay? So, when you get into the realm of designing game mechanics and attributes, however, you must be exact. Okay, so ano bang ibig sabihin ng you must be exact? So, kanina, sabi nga natin, you define them. You define the attributes. Hindi porket sinulat natin, okay, strength. Yun na yung strength. Yun lang yung gagawin mo, strength. You need to define it. You must be exact. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng strength and how you're going to apply strength pagdating dun sa game na nilalaro mo or na dinidesign mo. So in here, no, to flesh out the definition of the strength attribute for a game, you need to know what attribute is being used in a game. So halimbawa, yung game mo will be katulad nito, you're lifting down caber. Yung caber na to is basically troso. Yan, troso, okay? So how you're going to use ba yung strength pagdating doon sa doon sa game na yung dinidesign mo. So halimbawa, no, sabihin na natin, you could refer to strength as maximum weight of a caber that the player can successfully flip. Okay. So, halimbawa, itong character na to, you assign it strength na sabihin na natin 75. Okay? So, ngayon, ang sabihin na natin, your character with the strength of 75, kaya niya magbuhat ng caber or ng troso na to up to 75 kilos. So, yun yung pwede mong gawin as parang definition on how you're going to define and use strength within the game. So, gaano kabigat yung kaya niyang i-lift? If yung strength niya is 75, pwede mong gawin na ang corresponding value nung kaya niyang i-lift or buhatin is 75 kilos. If bibigyan mo siya ng 80 kilos na object, syempre, hindi niya kayang buhatin yung object na yun. So, you can use that as definition of how you're going to define strength and how you're going to use strength dun sa game na dinidesign mo. So, considerations when defining an attribute. So, through the brainstorming and research, you might discover dozens or even hundreds of attributes that could be assigned to a data object. So, in the early process of listing attributes, you want to come up with as many attributes as possible. So, when the list of possibilities is fleshed out, it's time to start being more selective about attributes that are going into the game. So, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, no, as many attributes, mas maganda. Why? Kasi, along the way naman, babawasan at babawasan mo yung mga attributes na yan, depending dun sa whether those attributes can be usable dun sa game nyo or not. Okay? So, halimbawa, if yung game nyo is about lifting itong mga objects na to, kumbaga, parang yung game mo, parang palakasan lang kung paano mo mabubuhat. Okay? Will range attack or range attack accuracy matter? Mostly no, kasi magbubuhat lang naman yan eh. How about yung stench? Sabihin na natin, it won't fit. So, pagdating dito sa considerations natin, no, yung attribute nyo should be something useful for the game. If yung attribute is sabihin na natin na for storyline, pwede yan. Storyline, it has a purpose. Or sabihin na natin, if it has an actual purpose dun sa mechanics, mas okay. Pero kung wala talaga siyang purpose, you might want to consider not adding that attribute dun sa game or dun sa mismong character mo. So, here are two considerations, no, when you're defining the attribute. Katulad nga na sinabi ko kanina, every attribute should have a use. So, hindi ka naman kasi maglalagay ng isang attribute na for display only. No. So, it should affect the mechanics or the rules or yung attribute na yon should be something useful for the game. If it doesn't serve a purpose, you might want to consider not to add it anymore. Yung second attribute natin should be intimately related to mechanics. So for instance, if you have a character with a strength attribute, you need to relate that attribute to the mechanics that will use it, which might be combat. Okay? So for example, ng combat, so halimbawa, yung punch mo, gaano kalakas, pwede mong i-align yun dun sa strength attribute mo. Okay, kung halimbawa yung strength mo, gagamitin mo naman siya as endurance. So, pwede yun. Halimbawa, how long kayang sabihin na natin, mag-cast ng skills ng character mo before siya mag-replenish ng kanyang mana or ng kanyang mana potion, or pwedeng yung strength mo gamitin as to resistance to damage. Halimbawa, you're strong, no? Yung mga simpleng arrows won't affect you. Sabihin na natin, but bullets will have more damage pagdating sa'yo. So, when narrowing your list of possible attributes down to the final list, it is a good practice to tie each proposed attribute to the mechanics that will use the attribute. So, excuse me. So, again, no, attributes should be intimately related to the mechanics. Maliban sa it serves a purpose, no? Kasi, excuse me, kapag sinabi natin purpose, pwede yung attribute gamitin lang natin for the storyline, no? For, tawag dito, para dun sa kwento. That's possible. But, as much as possible, hindi lang siya basta useful, even for the storyline, it should be, tawag dito, directly affecting yung mechanics nung game nyo. So, grouping attributes. So, when narrowing your list of possible attributes down to the final list, it's a good practice to tie each purpose attribute to the mechanics that will use the attribute in the game. So, when narrowing your list of possible attributes down to the final list, it's a good practice to tie each proposed attribute to the mechanics. Okay? So, hindi. Parang umulit lang, no? So, you tie it down doon sa mechanics mo. Parang napakasimple lang naman yan. You group it according to use. Okay? I-group mo yung mga attributes mo according to use. So, kung halimbawa yung mga attributes na yan for items lang, yan, attach mo yan, sama-sama sa mga items yan. Okay? So, this will be some of the examples ng mga groups na pwede niyo gawin or grouping ng attributes na pwede niyo gawin for your attributes. So, when narrowing down your list of possible attributes to the final list, i-group mo sila into something like this. So, let's say itong mga 4 na to. So, you have your strength, dexterity, health, and speed. Okay? So, halimbawa, i-group mo itong mga to. Halimbawa, ito. You've listed down some of the attributes. Itong some of the attributes na to can be listed down under strength. So, it's up to you kung sino yung mga ilalagay mo dyan. Okay? Halimbawa, for strength, you have bench press weight, bicep curl weight, squat weight, baseball pitching speed, football kicking distance, melee. So, halimbawa, for dexterity naman, bench press, weight, bicep curl, weight. Ayan. Kung mapapansin nyo, meron dito mga paulit-ulit. It's up to you kung gusto nyo silang ilagay dito sa strength or gusto nyo siyang ilagay dito sa dexterity. And possible din na both pareho silang meron. Okay? Halimbawa, for health naman, blood pressure, heart rate, etc. etc. So, for speed, halimbawa, ito, 100 meter dash time, marathon time, movement rate. Yung mga sample of unused natin, height, weight, etc. etc. Okay? Itong mga unused na to, most probably pwede mo nang alisin itong mga to. So, again, no, sabi ko nga kanina, something else to notice in the final list is that the attribute melee is listed in the strength category and in the acrobatics. Okay? Is in the dexterity category. So, ibig sabihin, no, yung mga attributes natin can be listed down to multiple categories. If it's related naman and it's required dun sa game, isali mo na siya to multiple categories. It's up to you. You're the designer. Make sure lang na related yung mga attributes na to sa isa't isa. So, for your assignment, no, ayan, ito yung magiging assignment nyo, guys. So, what you're going to do is, I want you to divide yourselves to groups with 5 members. So, sabihin na natin, maximum 5 members each. So, what you're going to do is you're going to design a draft of a game character with original concept art and attributes with a description of purpose. So, you'll also be creating an infographic image for your output. So, halimbawa ito, you can use this parang simpleng format wherein you'll be having, tawag dito, a concept art ng inyong character. Yung character na i-create nyo, syempre, hindi lang isang view yan. Okay, you need to add multiple views. Sabihin na natin front view, yung dalawang side, top view, yung sabihin na natin yung sa rear view. Ayan, no. Provide images. So, halimbawa, ito. Ayan, we have different images from different angles. Pagdating sa character nyo, possibly different types of emotions. Ayan. Okay? So, tapos, aside from adding yung inyong concept art, no? Aside dun sa mga images nyo, I want you to also add what will be the different attributes nitong character nyo. Okay? So, siguro, I'll be asking you to list down at least 10 attributes. Okay? List down 10 attributes para dun sa game character nyo. So, aside from the attributes, no, I also want you to add descriptions or definitions how these attributes will be used, or how these attributes is used to define your character. Okay? What I want you to do, guys, no, is I want you to create an original concept art. Okay? Create kayo ng concept art nyo, sarili, bahala kayo on what software you're going to use, no? So, what's important is, by our meeting next year, or our first meeting next year, you should have, okay, a infographic image that will be presented dun sa klase. I'll be asking your group leaders to present your output dun sa next na meeting natin. So, ang gagawin ng leader is, he or she will be going to discuss, ano ba itong character nyo na to? So, what will be the inspirations? Bakit ito yung naging itsura ng character nyo? Okay? I-discuss niya rin doon, these are the attributes ng character namin. I-explain niya rin yung attributes, bakit ito yung napili niyo for the attribute of your character. Okay? So, that will be your assignment for next week. You don't need to submit itong assignment na to kasi you'll be presenting it dun sa mismong meeting natin. Okay? So, if you have questions, guys, regarding this module, okay, mag-comment na lang po kayo dun sa MS Teams natin. Mag-attach na lang kayo ng questions sa MS Teams kung saan ko ilalagay itong video na to. Okay? So, that's it, guys, for this module. Thank you.